This concert is one of my favorites of the season. It's framed by two works by Mozart, with pieces by two composers who loved his music in between, Tchaikovsky and Debussy. In 1780, Mozart was commissioned to compose an opera in the style of Gluck, a French composer from the early classical period. The result was Idomeneo, an opera score incredibly rich in different musical styles and techniques. And unlike all Mozart's other opera scores, Idomeneo includes a ballet, which was an important part of French opera in the 18th century. French ballets were expected to adhere to strict conventions, one being the inclusion of a chaconne, a piece with a repeated bass line over which variations were written. When Mozart came to write his chaconne, he kept the title, but little else, composing a stately dance that opens the ballet and recurs several times, much more like a rondo theme in a symphony or a concerto. The opening dance leads into a much faster pas seul, a solo dance. The music has the sound of earlier music. Sometimes you might think it comes from the late Baroque or the pre-classical periods. Mozart's music is full of surprises and odd turns, as if he was giving the dancer scope to show off his skills. Tchaikovsky considered his Serenade one of his finest works, writing in his diary, "This is a piece from the heart. The first movement is my homage to Mozart. It's intended to be an imitation of his style, and I should be delighted if I thought I had in any way approached my model." In 1880, Tchaikovsky was working on two pieces simultaneously. The Serenade was one, the other a commission for the unveiling of a Pushkin memorial in Moscow. He found writing the memorial piece rather tiresome, confiding to a friend, "What can you write on the occasion of the opening of an exhibition except banalities and generally noisy passages?" The piece he was referring to was his 1812 overture. There's nothing especially Mozartian about the Serenade's first movement. Perhaps Tchaikovsky was imagining how Mozart might have written had he still been alive in 1880, just as Prokofiev would imagine Haydn's potential modern style in his classical symphony. The Serenade begins with a chorale that haunts the whole piece, full of nobility. The second movement is a waltz. And for me, Tchaikovsky is the king of the waltz, far surpassing any of the Strausses. This waltz begins with one of Tchaikovsky's most gracious melodies. The slow movement is the work's emotional core. We hear another chorale-like theme, this time rising into an expressive elegy. A tender melody begins in the first violins, elaborated above delicate pizzicati in the lower strings. And the finale features two folk songs, first in the slow introduction, and then in the rustic-sounding Russian theme of the main body of the fast movement. In the coda, the chorale that opened the first movement returns, bringing us full circle. Next comes one of the works that changed music forever. But whereas other modern masterpieces like Stravinsky's Rite of Spring or Schoenberg's 5 orchestral pieces announced themselves with great intensity, Debussy's Prelude to the Afternoon of a Faun changes everything with the languor of a hot summer's afternoon. Debussy was inspired by a poem by his friend Stéphane Mallarmé that tells the story of a dream in which a flute-playing faun has his way with two nymphs. A faun is a mythical creature that's half man and half calf. Think of Mr. Tumnus in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Debussy suggests the story of the poem in music that is hazy and sensuous, elusive and suggestive. The prelude begins with the faun playing his flute all alone, perhaps the most famous flute solo in classical music. When the horns and harp respond, we're immediately transported into a magical realm. Debussy ushered in a new way of writing where every nuance of musical sound, of orchestral color, and harmony take on added meaning. There's a delicacy and beauty in the sonorities from the orchestra that's completely new and that would influence future generations of composers enormously. Mozart's last three symphonies are his greatest, but also his most mysterious. We don't know who commissioned them or for what occasion they were composed. Of the last three, number 39 is the least well known. The finale of the Jupiter Symphony with its awe-inspiring fugue and the famous nervous opening of the G minor Symphony both eclipse it in most audiences' minds. Yet for me, number 39 is the greatest of all. A work that combines grace and lightness in the first movement, the depths of profundity in the second, and sheer joy in the finale, but all with magnificent understatement, which only increases its greatness. The first movement begins with a stately, slow introduction that merges seamlessly into an allegro. This is an extremely subtle and new idea. There's no stopping of time before the allegro begins. And when it does, the music is almost a waltz, starting hesitantly before blossoming with confidence. The Andante con moto begins very elegantly, unassumingly, but with a wink in its eye. Without noticing, we soon move into areas of great power and passion. The menuetto is a swaggering Ländler, based on a real folk tune, with a trio for clarinets, Mozart's favorite instrument, while the finale is one of Mozart's most original creations. This is music of great humor that never sits still, with perpetual motion. Usually Mozart's finales have many themes, often many more than other composers, but here he confines himself to one single, sunny tune in a manner we usually associate with Haydn. And as if to underscore how great this single theme is, the symphony ends not with the usual powerful chords, but with a final cheeky iteration of the smiling melody.